It's video game time. Are you ready for Avery's segment? You are ready? Well, you know what? He's promised me two things, buddy, and I'm not sure which game he's gonna offer us this week. Shall we find out together? Over to you, Avery. Gamer Station.
I told myself this was about justice, about protecting the weak, but I was wrong.
Hey, I'm Avery Score with another exciting and educational episode of the Gamer Station. And why are you going to be titillated and amazed today? Well, we are checking out Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. It's got to be one of the longest, most convoluted, and just downright trying too hard titles in the history of video games. But never mind, title doesn't matter. It's the gameplay we're after. And the gameplay has been switched up in new and interesting ways. In Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, you're going to play the role of Raiden, who you might remember from Metal Gear Solid 2 as the main protagonist. A lot of people don't like Raiden. They don't care for his voice, they don't care for his effeminate face, they don't care for his flaxen long locks and weird backstory. But I'll tell you this, he does get developed more than in other games and is quite interesting. So let's talk about the gameplay, which is the hugest change in Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance eschews the old stealth, kind of hiding in boxes gameplay for the most part of the previous entries in the franchise, in favor of a hack and slash aesthetic that is just a huge departure from anything that you've seen before from these games. Raiden has several weapons at his disposal, weapons that he culls from his fallen enemies, and also his trusty high-frequency blade, which he uses to great effect. You have light and heavy attacks, and you can vary these up to produce combos, but additionally what you can do is by holding down on the L1 trigger and by moving your left analog stick, you can execute a series of precise strikes. Now that's really the crux of the gameplay. When you're doing damage to an enemy and he's on the point of falling into his grave, a little center mark will show up on his body, and if you hit that target, that bullseye, he'll explode in a mess of gore and goo, and you'll be able to harvest his organs or his spine or something. It's really hard to tell, in order to replenish your own life and power gauges and do more crazy combos. In addition to that, you can sever limbs, kind of Dead Space style, from your enemies, making them less effective in battle and effectively neutralize them. So technically it might be possible to complete this game without killing anyone, although I don't know why you'd want to. You just simply decapitate them and remove their limbs, and it'll be a messy thing no matter what. So let's talk about the plot. Raiden starts out the game in some African country. He's working for a private military corporation, and he's more upgraded than ever. He's wielding some steel, man. And long story short, another rival private military company attacks with their own cybernetic samurai. Things get hectic, the Prime Minister dies, and Raiden pretty much goes on a revenge quest, hence Revengeance. Things shift throughout the course of the game, and it becomes more about saving the children, as Raiden was himself a child soldier, from suffering the same fate that he did. And throughout this, Raiden is severely tested, injured, rebuilt up, and has to face his own inner demons, and his history as the crazed killer Jack the Ripper will come to the fore once again. I will tell you that, but no more spoilers. Anyway, the story has this kind of political diatribe tone where it's basically criticizing private military companies and Western capitalism run amok. But it's an analysis of Western culture that really comes from the outside. The game is overwhelmingly and unapologetically Japanese in its ethos, and whenever it has to sort of include elements of Western, European, or American cultures, it kind of falls flat. It feels like there's a really tenuous grasp on that. Anyway, there are sprawling cutscenes, and quite a lot of them. You can skip them, of course, if you're a cutscene skipper, or you can watch them. And the Metal Gear Solid series has always kind of walked this line between inane and brilliant, between campy and high concept. And this game kind of falls more on the inane and campy side of the spectrum, I would have to say. The dialogue and the voice acting is just appalling. The dialogue is quite poorly written most of the time. And the voice acting includes these awkward pauses, which sort of give the impression that the actors were never actually in the same place together. You'll have some quip or retort, and then your interlocutor will take about a second and a half to respond to it completely off turn. So that's quite distracting, at least in the English language options. I couldn't speak to the Japanese version of the game. Raiden's voice has always been annoying in a lot of people's opinion. I tend to agree. This game is no exception. In fact, during his transformation sequences to Jack the Ripper, it goes down about an octave, becomes a little more gravelly, a little more David Hayter Solid Snake, and it's more tolerable as a result. So you kind of look forward to, you know, transforming into this horrible killer as a result. The story aside, one of the game's major strengths is the fast pace of the action and the fast pace of the visuals. It's very technically impressive that the frame rate of the game is able to keep pace with the gameplay. There's a solid 60 frames per second with nary a jitter, except perhaps in some loading sequences or when you're first coming into an environment. Speaking of the environments, they're kind of boring, they're pretty muddy, there's really nothing to write home about. The textures are grainy and generally they're unremarkable. More effort has gone into the modeling of enemies and just making objects destructible. One cool thing about the game is many things in your environment, but notably not all, are destructible. So Raiden can slice them up and dice them. Sometimes those have strategic implications. For example, you might need to fell an overpass in order to bring enemies down from above, or you might need to get through a grate or fence by simply cutting it down. But most of the time, it's just fun to watch cars or whatnot explode as you swing in a whirlwind of steel. That's pretty cool. Ultimately, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is an extremely fun game to play. At its core, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is pretty much your simple hack and slash game in the same vein as a Devil May Cry or God of War, although its gameplay packs perhaps a little less variety than you'd expect from a Devil May Cry title, for example. That said, the core gameplay mechanic of your sort of slow motion hacking and slashing, mixed in with the light and the heavy attacks, is interesting enough to keep you engaged for the entire length of the title, despite a lot of repetitive encounters. The boss battles, however, perhaps a step below what you might expect from a Metal Gear title. If you're used to Metal Gear Solid favorites like Vamp and Psycho Mantis, you won't find that level of characterization here. You do face some interesting characters called the Winds, and these each have their own distinctive personality, backstory, and what have you. But there isn't really a relationship that draws you in so much as that of Jetstream Sam. Now, Jetstream Sam is a Brazilian cybernetic ninja, much in the same vein as Raiden. He's very powerful and deadly, and he's all about pushing Raiden over the edge and slowly pushing him towards the precipice of madness, which indeed he succeeds in doing. The dynamic between Raiden and his natural foil is pretty well done compared to the other elements of dialogue in the game. It's engaging, it's interesting, it's sometimes humorous, and that's definitely a high point in the game's narration. Overall, I would recommend Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance to any fans of action games, to stalwart fans of the series, although with the caveat that you're going to be quite surprised by the gameplay, and if you are geared more towards stealth action, you're going to be sorely disappointed here. This is a hack and slash beat 'em up game. So, bold moves, Konami, bold moves, Hideo Kojima. I enjoyed it. I hope you will. So pick up a copy and let me know. I'm Avery Score, and this was the Gaming Station.
Oh, sadly, we've come to the end of today's episode, but you know what? In the meantime, why don't you head over to Facebook or Twitter or astroawani.com for anything else you might like to see and to have a recap, perhaps. Big shout out to Tokyo Pastry for hosting us here today. My name is Adam Carruthers. Until next time.